Okay, we're in 2 Samuel chapter 20. And I'm going to talk about sabotage and siege ramps.
Say that one more time.
Sabotage and siege ramps. Okay, David allowed a vacuum to grow in the nation's leadership. 20. I'm not. 2 Samuel chapter 20. Job was forced to build a siege ramp to deal with the problem, and Joab was not a good guy. We find him in a great deal of political intrigue in David's court. He literally murders anybody that tries to take over his job. Anybody that David tries to replace him with, he'll murder them. David is no longer running from Absalom, but he's beginning to deal with matters more of a head-on manner. But there's a lesson to be learned from his actions in pursuing Sheba, who was in rebellion against David as king. And that's what our lesson is going to be about, Sheba. In 2 Samuel, we find that Joab and the army to win a place in David's court, because, last week he was told that, he's not going to be the leader anymore over the army. That Amasa, who was Absalom's general, he's now going to be the leader, and he had to do that to try to win the people of Israel to his side, because they were fighting among themselves. They wanted him as king, but they really didn't want him as king. It's like, here we have a king, now we don't have a king. Now here we have a king. We want David as our king, but no, we really don't want David as our king. Because they're wishy-washy. Anybody that comes along and says, oh, I'll be your king, they start going after them. Now this is Israel I'm talking about, the 10 tribes. So Sheba, Amasa, who David named to replace Joab, because of Joab's disobedience when he killed Absalom, he tarried too long in chasing Sheba down, who argued with David that David should no longer be king. And I'm going to look at some of the stuff from Sheba's point of view. The nation was divided over the issue of whether David should be returned to the throne, because he had run away. Instead of standing there and fighting for his throne, he run. He took his eyes off God. And that's how we do sometimes. When we take our eyes off God, what's the first thing we want to do? Run. We want to get away as far as we can, don't we? And I think that's what David did. He took his eyes, his focus off what God wanted for him. Because, see, God gave him this throne. He promised him this throne. He would have fought for him to keep his throne. He would have just snapped his fingers and Absalom would have been gone. And anybody that, he done it in Exodus when they went against Moses. And they have all these scribes and stuff, and they know what God would do for them. God opened up the ground and just swallowed them up when they went against Moses, some of the people. He would have done the same thing to Absalom. David would have been upset about it, but he would have done it. See, that's how big our God is. And see, we put him in a box, and we don't realize how big he is and what he can do for us.
Well, ain't a couple chapters back, did they go into the woods?
Yes, it was that chapter before, when they was fighting the Israelites.
What was it, 10,000?
Yeah, 10,000 of them fell. The trees and the woods just sucked them up. See, that's how big God is. But you have to trust him. Yes.
The city that God swallowed up, that's how we call it AI.
City.
The
Yeah, that was in Exodus. Yeah. I think they were still in the desert, wasn't they? Yeah. They still just wandering around the 40 years from different places. I don't really know, because I really hadn't done an in-depth study on Exodus. Yeah, he probably did. Yeah. So Sheba argued that David should no longer be king. In his point of view, the nation was divided over the issue of whether David should be returned to the throne. The people of Judea sent for David to resolve the issue. Sheba declared the northern part of the nation, which was Israel, should not follow David. Whether or not he planned to establish himself as king, it's not certain, but he was the rebellion. And why? Because of injustice in the land. Absalom had sown quite a few chords of discontent. During his period of meeting people at the palace gate, he pointed out every flaw that David had. You know, that's how gossip is, isn't it? When you're a gossiper, all you want to do is sit at the gate and point out every flaw of who you don't like. And that's what Absalom did. He'd sit at the gate and he'd tell him, oh, David won't help you. He'll do this. He'll do this. This will be his choice. So David's reign and strongly implied that there was no justice to be found in David's court. And this was not an unfounded accusation either. David's reign saw too far little justice in his kingdom. David did a great job of defending his people against external foes. When it came to the Philistines, the Amorites, the Acolytes, all the factions that was coming against his kingdom, but when it came to confrontation with his own people, he just didn't want to deal with it. He'd go hide his head in the sand. He didn't want to have anything to do with anything that was confrontal with him. David had committed adultery and murder. He escaped the penalties of law when he should have been killed himself. His son, Amnon, had raped his sister Tamar. While we see that David was furious over it, he did nothing. He got mad and did nothing. Absalom murdered his oldest son, Ammon, in vengeance, and once again, David did nothing. Absalom was afraid he was going to do something, so he ran off to his grandfather, Tamar, so he was banished from his presence. Because Joab got him brought back, but David didn't want to deal with him. He didn't want to see him. He didn't want to deal, out of sight, out of mind. So Absalom took the throne from David, and rather than fight, he ran. And that's why I said he turned his eyes on God. All these instances, he didn't read the scroll. He didn't do what they told him to do, what he should have done. When his son raped Tamar, he should have done something there. If he had nipped that right there, when that happened, none of this other stuff would have happened. Yes. He was complacent with it. That's what was so bad about it. See, he didn't even know his own kids. He didn't know how evil his son was. And just think about this. This man was going to be king. He was next in line to be king. Could you imagine if he ever became king, how evil Judea would have been, Jerusalem? And we're going to see when I get in Kings how evil those kings in the northern reign were, really. So David ran. Joab murdered Absalom, and David's drastic action was to reassign Joab, basically a do-nothing approach. Here he killed his son. He told him not to. When David returns to Jerusalem, he finds Mephibosheth. He didn't do nothing. Who obviously, because he had not shaved, bathed, or even changed his clothes, he was mourning for David. Or perhaps been hiding. David does not want to deal with justly setting the issue between Ziba, his servant who lied on him and told him he had joined Absalom because he was going to be king someday. He wanted to take over himself. And he says, he told him, just divide the lands between the two men. His aunt Mephibosheth's answer, he says abruptly, makes it clear that he is not interested in the land, but rather rebuilding the relationship with David. He told him he was, to be clear, David, who was lying in that situation but did nothing to bring about justice. David's misbehavior and a do-nothing attitude led to a vacuum that made it questionable whether he had a right to return to the throne. Sheba was leading the Israelites to a vote of no confidence and had no indication that anybody cared anything about David, especially the Israelite people. The only ones that wanted him back was Judea, which was his tribe. Did he try to resolve the issues? We have no indication that he ever tried to do anything. Sheba was leading the Israelites. He felt justified in his rebellious actions. He wasn't right to do what he did, but he felt that he was right. That David was a do-nothing king, that as long as he wants everybody else to do everything for him. David didn't want to have confrontation with anybody. But David was a man after God's own heart. David was a man who he loved God, had godly characteristics. But if you go back into the Bible and you'll see that most of the men that did love God, they all had flaws, didn't they? Except Jesus. It was much easier for David to trust God and be a man after God's own heart when he was in the field tending his sheep than when he had responsibilities over the whole kingdom. See, in our own spiritual growth, there are more places where it is easier than others to be a person who is following God's heart, God's ways, and pay attention to God. Because when you get out in the world and the world starts coming at you, it's hard to follow God's ways, isn't it? It's hard to be where instead when you're in a situation where you can find God, and it's quiet, and there's nothing coming at you, it's a lot better, isn't it? Even though we know God is everywhere. Anywhere you go, God will call out to you if all you have to do is just call out to Him. But see, that's where we fail a lot of times. We don't trust Him. We want to do things our way or no way. With all David's responsibilities, he made mistakes. He's like us. He made a lot of mistakes, didn't he? This does not mean he did not love God, have faith in God. It just meant there was times in his life that his focus wasn't on God. Okay, sabotage is a deliberate action aimed at weakening policy, effort, or organization through subversion, obstruction, disruption, or destruction. One who engages in sabotage is a saboteur. They typically try to conceal the identities because of the consequences of their actions. An adverse condition might be sabotage. It's sometimes called tampering, meddling, tinkering, malicious pranks, malicious hacking, and failure to act as instructed. In war, the word is used to describe the activity of an individual or group not associated with the military of the parties at war, agent or indigenous supporter. Few people self-identify as saboteurs. In their own minds, they fancy themselves to be misunderstood revolutionaries. Much of their poor behavior comes in reaction to their sight or missteps. In our past studies, we've noticed David had used Joab and his brother Abishai to serve as quality warriors. In addition, we learned that he did not like them for their counsel of actions, but they were good fighters. They were good generals. And you know, Joab always had David's back. He fought for him. He was with his mighty men. He was with him from the time he left Saul when Saul was after him. But he was doing it for the wrong reason. He was not doing it because God put him there. He was doing it because he wanted to be over everything. He wanted to be right there so he could tell everybody what to do, even David. And David listened to him too. So we have witnessed on many occasions he tried to get rid of them, but kept their positions and responsibilities no matter what he tried to do to them. David's son Absalom had attempted a coup and appointed Amasa as his head general. Due to Joab's killing of Absalom, David tried to stick it to Joab because he was mad at him and replace him with Amasa because that's what the people of Israel wanted, military leader. Because see, they had been following Absalom. All these people, Israelites, had been following Absalom. They was with him in the coup. By rights, David could have killed every one of them because they had committed treason against his kingdom. But David didn't want to confront them. That's another thing. He had all these infractions behind him. Instead of being for him, they was constantly backbiting against him. So we're going to see a decision by David. It was not a good one, but we're going to see that Amasa did not become a new loyal follower of David. He still had the mindset of Absalom's policies and set about his own form of sabotage towards David's kingdom rule. Joab sees what Amasa was trying to pull and takes matters again in his own hands. And there, I'm going to be in chapter 20. I'm going to start in verse 1. And there happened to be a rebel whose name was Sheba, the son of Barkadi, a Benjamite. And he blew a trumpet and said, We have no share in David, nor do we have an inheritance in the son of Jesse, every man to his tents, O Israel. See, they had been in bitter arguments with Judea, the leaders had, and the rest of Israel, because they said, well, there's 10 of us. There should 10 tribes. We should have more call on David. He should be our king more than Judea, which Judea, David was of the tribe of Judea. So he went and they was fighting among themselves. And here they was all for David right there for a little while. You know, they wanted him back in Jerusalem. He was their king. Now, they're going back to their tents because of one man. That's why I say they're wishy-washy. See, the Bacardi, it says that he was a base fellow. He was a Benjamite. He blew the ram's horn to summon the northern tribes to desert David and return home and to prepare for their independence away from David. If David wanted Judea, then he could have Judea, and Judea could have him. In their view, he had demonstrated by what had happened that he did not see Israel as having a part. Well, all right, if that was so, Israel was done with him. Judea had thus not done David any favors in their arrogant behavior, had they? He got Israel to turn completely against him here for the moment. So every man in Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, the son of Barkadi. But the men of Judea, from Jordan as far as Jerusalem, remained loyal to their king. So the result was that the men of Israel that had recently returned to David seceded from the kingdom and ceased to follow him. Now they were turning away from him. One minute they were for him, now they're away from him. See, the men of Judea had been the source of rebellion. Now it was Israel. But it's certainly an indication of how little united the kingdom was. On the other hand, in their previous attitude, the rebellious men of Judea stood firmly by their king and accompanied him to Jerusalem. So David was king now in Jerusalem. Now David came to his house of Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 women, his concubines, whom he had left to keep house, and put them in seclusion, and supported them, but he did not go in to them. So they were shut up to the day of their death, living in widowhood. Okay, these women had been set up on top of the house in a tent, and Absalom had raped every one of them to defile them before Israel. And it was against David. He wanted to show everybody he was in control. And see, because he done that, now here they, even though they couldn't help it, they could not never marry because of the Israelite law. They could never marry anybody else. They had to be put up in seclusion. David was going to take care of them the whole time. But they were, they had become his son's wives, is what had happened to them. And there they were untouchable by him. But he nevertheless treated them with due honor. However, in the view of their status, they had to be closely watched and guarded because I guess they was afraid they would run off. Because, you know, it's not good if you don't never have any kids. And I think that's a lot had to do with it. See, they marrying someone who had been so closely connected with both the king and a rival king could have given the people ideals, and that could not be allowed. And the king, verse 4, and the king said to Amasa, assemble the men at Judea for me within 3 days, and be present here yourself. So Amasa went to assemble the men of Judea, but he delayed longer than the set time which David had appointed him. See, Amasa was David's close relative. He was picked by Absalom to be his military leader, and now he was chosen by David to replace Joab. Now here's what he called on David to gather together. David called on him to gather the troops because they were going to go after Sheba. Because if they did not stop him, it could be worse than what it was with Absalom, is what David was afraid of. So if he did not act before he became a real danger, Amasa was, however, either inefficient or careless because he didn't do what David told him to do. He tarried longer than what he should have because he was reluctant to follow the general when fighting Absalom, but also partly because he did not treat his position seriously enough. He completely failed his duty. He did not do what he was told. And David said to Abishai, 6, now Sheba the son of Barchadi will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your Lord's servants and pursue him, lest he find himself fortified cities and escape us. Well, here David turned to faithful Abishai. And right behind Abishai is going to be Joab, his brother. Wherever Abishai is, Joab's going to be. Because, Joab wants to be the leader. He wants to be right there at everything. Okay. Joab's men with the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and all the mighty men went out after him, and they went to Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, the son of Barchadi. He gathered all Joab's men. Standing army was always ready, together with David's bodyguard and his mighty men. David had 400 mighty men that always fought with him. They run with him everywhere he went. They fought with him. And these men were not Israelites. They were Cherethites, Pelethites. These men were more loyal to David than his own people were because they loved him. They had been with him all the whole time he was running from Saul, and now they were with him again. When they were at the large stone which is in Gibeon, Amasa came before them. Now Joab was dressed in battle armor, and on it was a belt with a sword fastened in its sheath at his hips. As he was going forward, it fell out. When they reached the great stone of Gibeon, here comes Amasa now. Amasa, Joab is his cousin. He doesn't think he's going to do anything bad to him. Because, they're cousins. They're family. So the mission was now extremely urgent, and there was no time for negotiating or arguing with an official military leader who had proved to be so negligent and inefficient. Nor did they want to have to do battle with any men who were with him. So Joab made a swift decision. And presumably on afterwards, it had to be necessary because of the urgency of the situation. Then Joab, verse 9, are you in health, my brother? And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. Okay, he's greeting him like he loves him. And he's going to stab him in the back, isn't he? He's giving him a welcome sign. We are given nothing about the background. There was no repercussions on Joab later as a result of what followed. It seems reasonable to assume that Joab considered that he had a reason for thinking about doing this. That it was Amasiah's failure, that he had turned his back on David. He didn't care about what his job was. He thought in his mind, he was thinking that Amasa was committed treason. That would no doubt explain why Joab felt himself justified in executing him. Even Joab could have not murdered either of them out of a hand without a good reason, and that was his reason. Because, he had just murdered Abner before that. Because David had took Joab out again and put Abner in there, and he killed him. And now, yeah, he is. But Amasa did not notice the sword that was in Joab's hand, and he struck him in the stomach, and his entrails poured out on the ground, and he did not strike him again. Thus he died. Then Joab and Abishai, his brother, pursued Sheba, the son of Barkardi. Terrible, wouldn't he? You imagine walking up to somebody and kiss them and then stab them at the same time? Especially your own cousin. Be cold-hearted, wouldn't it? Y'all got something to say about the lesson? What? What'd you say? Yeah, just went on fighting. Just killed him, left him laying there bleeding out, and just went on. They might have a knife head, right? See, Amasa revealed that he was so naive that he did not heed Joab. Because, if I had been just taking somebody else's job and he knew what he had done before, anybody that come up against Joab or come against him, tried to take over his job, he'd just kill them. No repercussions. David done nothing to him. Amasa should have heeded okay. But I think in his mind he thought, well, he's my kinfolks. He's my cousin. He's not going to do nothing to me. He showed him, didn't he? It doesn't matter. No, not to Joab. See, he was taken completely by surprise with Joab's kiss of friendship ended by a sword in the body, that his bowels came coming out, falling on the ground. He didn't kill him. He did hit him twice. He knew he was going to die, didn't he? There is nothing inefficient about Joab's military expertise. He knew right what to do, didn't he? And the consequence was Amasa died a traitor's death. And it was made clear later that David did not approve of this execution. We'll see that in 1 Kings 2. For when he could have preferred to exercise mercy, but there is little doubt that he recognized that to quite some extent. See, Joab had been justified in his mind what he did was in a war situation. Joab from being punished. He was never punished until we'll see that Solomon does the punishing. Meanwhile, one of Joab's men stood near Amasa and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, follow Joab." But Amasa wallowed in his blood in the middle of the highway. And when the men saw that all the people stood still, he moved Amasa from the highway to the field and threw a garment over him. When he saw that everyone who came upon him halted. Okay, one of the young men that was with Joab saw Amasa laying there. And back then, if you see a fallen soldier, you have to pay tribute to them. You know, whatever it is they do. So everybody that was going by was stopping and looking at him and praying over him or whatever they did. So it wasn't urgency because they was all delaying when they should have been fighting, going to fight Sheba and the Israelites. Here they were stopping and gawking. It's like, I'd say, more or less. It's like when you see a wreck on the highway, everybody slows down the traffic and everybody wants to look to see what's going on. And I think that's how these soldiers were all doing. Well, one of the guys, one of the young men, he saw what was going on. So he decided to protect the body from birds or animals. He was afraid in not doing so, the men in question might cause an unacceptable delay. So, for as Amasa lay wallowing in his blood in the midst of the highway, all the people who passed stood still. So when he removed from the highway, all the people went in after Joab to pursue Sheba and the son of Barkardi. All he went through, all the tribes of Israel, to Abel and Beth Maachah and all the Berlites. So they were gathered together and also went after Sheba. So once the body was removed from the highway and covered up with a sheet so everybody couldn't gawk at it and see what was going on with it, they went to fight then. There's no delay. So Sheba, meanwhile, went through all the tribes of Israel trying to get anybody he could to follow him. From Abel to Beth Maachah, from all the Bertites, and all goodly number followed him. So when they came, 15, and when they came and besieged him in Abel at Beth Maachah, and they cast upon a siege mound against the city, and it stood by the rapid, and all the people who were Joab battered the wall to throw it down. So pursuit of Sheba now went on relentlessly. See, by David's troops, they made them a battering ram. So they was going to knock that wall down to get to Sheba and anybody that was in that city helping him. So when do you need to build a siege tower? Despite Joab's murderous behavior, he was seeking to bring a rebel to justice. He was right to make it clear to those who were standing on the wrong side of David the issue. He was serious about the issue. In your own life, there are times when you have to stand up for what's right. You have to let people know you're not going to take the appropriate action. Stand up to gossip. Proverbs 25:23. The north wind driveth away rain, so doth the angry countenance, a backbiting tongue. Stand up. You may have to stand up to your children to discipline. You may have to stand up to an abusive spouse. And it can go both ways. I don't just mean, I know women who are more just much abusive as they are men. Stand up and build your siege tower. Your siege tower may be grounding, discipline, or scolding a child, calling the police, confronting someone with the wrong thing that they have done to you. But build your tower and let people know where you stand. Then a wise woman cried out from the city, "Here, here, please say to Joab, come nearby that I may speak to you." Okay, here's a wise woman that had wanted no part in the rebellion. You notice it's a woman most of the time that does this stuff to the men. And she did not want to see the city devastated, her people killed, like Rahab. You remember her? Let down the scarlet thread. Sometimes the men all want to be, I'm tough. I want to fight. But the women use their head. So, right, women? We want to nip it in the bud. Yes, peacemakers. What? She did not want to see the city devastated. She went to the wall and called out to Joab and asked why he was so intent of destroying the city, which was so well known for being a source of wisdom, and why he was so keen on slaughtering the innocent Israelites. Because there was people, he just went into that city to hide, to run, because he hadn't got enough troops mustered yet to help him. 17, and when he had come near to her, the woman said, "Are you Joab?" He answered, "I am." Then she said to him, "Hear the words of your maidservant." And he answered, "I'm listening." So she spoke, saying, "They used to talk in former times, saying, they shall surely seek guidance at Abel, and so they would end disputes." See, this was the city of Abel, and that's where people would go to end disputes. Because the people in there, a lot of them were wiser. A lot of leaders was in there. See, her emphasis was on the fact that by reputation, Abel was a city renowned for its wisdom. And past, if anyone was seeking advice, they would be told, "Ask Abel." So apparently God had gave them wisdom to do disputes with. Yes, a wise man or a wise woman who could solve their problem or dispute. And we already know that she was a wise woman. Why are thus intended to recognize that whatever decision Abel comes to, which would be supported by the anointed one, the king, would be a realization of that wisdom. "I among the peaceable and the faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city and a mother in Israel? Why would you swallow up the inheritance of the Lord?" And Joab answered and said, far be it from me that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not so. But a man from the mountains of Ephraim, Sheba, the son of Barchadi by name, has raised his hand against the king, against David. Deliver him only, and I will depart from the city. So the women said to Joab, watch, his head shall be thrown over to you in the wall. Well, she emphasized that she was not involved in any attempt to secede from the kingdom, or she was not involved in the rebellion. She was just a wise mother who lived in this city, and she did not want to see her city destroyed. And there was a lot of others in that city that did not want this. She wanted peace, not war, and she was loyal to the king. Thus Joab should ask himself what was really his desire. To destroy such a city or the inhabitants, when it was like a mother in Israel and it was part of the inheritance of God. So he did not want to do neither, did he? He didn't want to destroy the city. All he wanted was the traitor, Sheba. So what happens when you build a tower? Sometimes you have to go ahead and prosecute the siege, right? A siege tower means nothing if it's an idle threat. If you're just constantly threatening to do something, your kids are going to eventually say, well, they're not going to do nothing. I say it all the time. I saw it with my kids. I could threaten them all day long and tell them, you're going to get a spanking, you're going to get a spanking. But if you don't really give them a spanking, it's not going to work, is it? I'm gonna. Yep. That's how. I was the one that I didn't want. I left it up to not me to do the spanking. But a woman called out and called to Joab, and Joab declared exactly what needed to be done to make matters right. He didn't allow himself to be distracted by other issues. Sheba was the root problem that needed to be dealt with. And she told him that she would deal with it. See, we get distracted by others who have misled or come against us. We want revenge, don't we? And anybody that's with them, we don't care who it is. We want revenge on them too, don't we? See, we get distracted by personalities, words, or even wrong actions. Deal with the real issue. Deal with the Sheba. Not those who have foolishly sided with Sheba, but deal with the Sheba. The people of the town recognized the right of Job's complaint. Sheba's in rebellion against the king, the one who was anointed over the kingdom. And the people of the town saw the issue. Without personalities, emotions, they just wanted truth. When you get the tower built, be prepared to deal with the truth. When you discipline your children, don't do it in anger, unrighteous anger. See, that's why I was always afraid. Y'all seen how mad I get sometimes. When you are angry with your spouse, don't be angry in unrighteous anger. You may have valid issues to be angry with people, but until you learn to state your case in a straightforward manner, well, you will likely not get responses. And I'll tell y'all why I get so mad when I see people talking to each other in church. when a teacher is up here teaching, or a preacher is up here preaching. Because the one behind you may be wanting to listen to what you're saying. And if you're talking among yourselves, what is the ones behind them going to do? They want to hear what you're saying. They don't care about what the teacher's saying, or the preacher, or anybody. You know, we don't just get up here, Mike and I and Jerry and Hope. We get up here to talk to you because we love you. We want you to get it. We want you to come in here, get your program, give your heart to Jesus, and go out there and be a light. We don't want you to have to come back 4 or 5 times. We want you to get it the first time. We don't, as Mike calls boomerangs, we don't like to have boomerangs. We want you to come to church. We want you to be able to sit in the middle aisle. Not sit on the right or, or the left. So, and not be a boomerang. And somebody told me the other day, I don't like when Mike calls us boomerangs. But what would you call it? A boomerang? And the reason he said that, he called a boomerang, is because a boomerang, you know, it's good. It's solid wood, it's good. It's yeah. And when you throw a boomerang, it goes out there, it spins around, and that's how a lot of people do. They go out in the world, they think they got it. Oh, they're good. I'm going to be good. I'm going to do good. I'm going to serve the Lord. I'm going to start reading my Bible. I'm going to be faithful in church. And then your boomerang gets tired, don't it? Of spinning around. And then you come right back. So your boomerang was rough, in rough condition. But see, we want our boomerangs to be in good condition. We want them to be healthy and happy, serving the Lord. Not lose your leg. But don't be a boomerang. Let this be your last time. The ones that's been in here 4, 5, 6 times, let this be your last time. Get in here, get in your word. When you go out of here, stay in it. Yes, stay in. Stay plugged in. Amen. Then the woman in her wisdom went to all the people, and they cut off the head of Sheba, the son of Barchadi, and threw it out to Joab. Then he blew a trumpet, and they withdrew from the city, every man to his tent. So Joab returned to the king at Jerusalem. So here she went and discussed the matter with the elders. Okay, if you don't do what Joab says, the city is going to be destroyed. All the people's going to be killed. Well, you know, the people that was with Joab, you know, that was probably a rough session here. That she, when she went and told them all that, because, you know, Sheba's actual support was with him. But the people banded together. They got old Sheba and they cut his head off. So their planned secession has seemingly been a no-show, wouldn't it? A headless man laying in the city. So when you pull down the tower, recognize when the issue is dealt with. In the case, it was clear. Sheba's head came flying over the wall. Joab pulled away from the siege and returned to Jerusalem. So Joab and all the army of Israel, Benadiah the son of Jehoiada was over the Cherethites and the Pethelites. Adoram was in charge of revenue. Josphat the son of Anhuled was recorder. Sheva was scribe. Zadok and Abner were the priest. And Ira the Jerarite was the chief minister under David. So they returned to Jerusalem. The battle was over and the issue settled. Learn how to know when an issue is settled. Joab didn't have to occupy the town to know he had convinced them that David was king. He could now go back to Jerusalem. Too often we hash and rehash battles, don't we? We wonder if the people who sided with those that were our enemies, that they really understood our position. Joab didn't do that. He recognized that the issue was settled. We need to learn to do the same. When we have an issue, go to our brother. Don't gossip and run to everybody else. We have to learn to also go to the King of Kings. We have to pray and ask for guidance when stuff is not going our way, or somebody's coming against us. God will take care of it. He'll deal with the situation. I've heard it all. I hear it a lot when people pray for others when they're coming against them. Next thing you know, they're gone. Maybe somebody in the program's having a problem with somebody, and the next thing you know, they leave. See, God dealt with it. Yes, it does. That's why Tasha really believed in prayer. That's why she wanted me to tell everybody to pray for her. And that's why I opened it up with prayer for her. So now I'm going to close with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask you to touch all the men and women, dear Lord. Just be with them as they go back to their bunks, dear Lord. And let them know you love them so much and that we love them here. And dear Lord, we just want everything good for them. We just want them to get it and to understand that you are the King of Kings and that you love us so much. In your name I pray. Amen.